So let's continue with this that is a bit more practical, this concept that is more practical. And this concept is about exchange rates. The name of this concept is the cross rate. Let me explain you why does the cross rate exist. Well, sometimes it's difficult that we find the price of two currencies. Like if I ask you what's the exchange rate of the American dollar with the peso, I think that's very easy to find, or and everyone more or less has an idea, right? But even if you don't know, you will find it anywhere. But if I ask you what's the price of the Polish zloty in terms of Mexican pesos, it can be quite difficult, right? To who thinks that much about Poland and Mexico is we are not there isn't it's not that common to have a relationship between Poland and Mexico. So sometimes the price of currencies might not exist, like they might not be reported. So what you can do is that you can calculate a cross rate. And how is this possible? It is possible because uh, every currency in the world is always priced against the American dollar. If you live in South Africa, in Brazil, in China, in England, in Mexico, in Poland, you will always find the exchange rate of your currency with the dollar. So what you can do is that you can calculate a third rate between these two. So here is another example. We have the Japanese yen in terms of US dollars. Then we have the Mexican peso in terms of US dollars. What we can do is that we can calculate what will be the exchange rate between the Japanese yen and the peso using this, right? So basically what you need to do is just to divide, right? Basically you only need to divide the exchange rate of the Japanese yen over the exchange rate of the Mexican peso in terms of dollar. And here, you need to take some notes in this because people tend to get really confused about this. So I will give you some tips that might be helpful for you. So first, how do I know when I can divide the rates? How do I know it is possible to do this division? Well, first thing that you need to know or that you need to notice is that make sure that you have the same currency at the bottom in the exchange rates. That means that if you have Japanese yen over dollar, right in here, Japanese yen over dollar, make sure that you have the dollar also at the bottom in the other currency, pesos and dollar. So you have Japanese yen and dollar, Mexican peso and dollar, then it is possible to eliminate the dollars, right? Make sure that you have the dollars at the bottom. If you don't have the dollars at the bottom, what can you do to fix this? You can use the trick that I show you with the indirect and direct quote, right? Imagine that you have dollars over pesos and you want to do this division. What can you do? Just divide 1 over this to switch it. We're going to do an exercise on Excel and I hope it helps you. So this is the first thing. Always check that you have the same currency at the bottom. And the next thing is if make what will be the result of the division? The result of the division follows the same logic as this division. If you have Japanese yen on top, make sure that you have Japanese yen on top in the answer, in the division. And if you have Mexican peso at the bottom, make sure that you have Mexican peso at the bottom, okay? Be careful with that. Be careful with those things. Here, you can practice switching the currencies in the way that I show you with the indirect and direct. If you don't know about math, follow my advice. Just, or if you don't want to bother about math, just follow my advice. Just find the same currency at the bottom, and that's okay. Then you can do the division, and when you divide, make sure that you follow the same order. That's if you don't know about math. But if you know about math, you might remember the tortilla law. That's how we call it in high school. But tortilla law, it's about mm, the division of fractions. So imagine that you have the Japanese yen over dollar, right? And you want to divide all of this over peso. And now I'm using the laptop, so my writing is even worse. But it's peso over dollar, right? So it's basically this. According to the tortilla law, you need to multiply these two. The answer will be Japanese yen times the dollar, and then divide this over the multiplying the result of multiplying these two, which is the US times Mexico. Okay. So now that you have only factors, you can eliminate the dollars, right? And the answer will be in terms of Japan over pesos, right? Like in here. So that's why my advice is always find the rates or make them work in that way that you have the same currency at the bottom, dollars at the bottom, dollars at the bottom. And when you divide, make sure that your answer has the same logic. If you had Japanese yen on top, make sure you have Japanese yen on top and Mexican peso at the bottom, Mexican peso at the bottom. Let's do a quick exercise. I think now, because we are going to finally do some practice, I think it's worth doing an exercise altogether. So for the purpose of this course, you can use Excel all the time. It's okay if you want to use Excel for everything, for the exams and for homeworks, activities, whatever, it's fine. Or if you want to use your calculator, it's also fine. Just at the end of the activity or the exam or whatever, just take a picture of your notes showing me how you do this, and it's okay for me. I'm okay with uh, I, if you use Excel or you do it by hand. So let's do an exercise, and let's do an exercise maybe between Mexico and Poland, because I talked about this earlier. During the course, I think I will be talking a lot about Poland sometimes, because my fiance is from Poland, and we always talk about things about how Poland is doing in the economy, and that's why I know the exchange rate is close to 4 zlotys per dollar. Um, so we have this example between Poland and Mexico. We have this data for the exercise. So we want to know what is the exchange rate between Mexico and Poland. That's what we want to calculate. Because so far we only know that each dollar costs 20 pesos, it's just an assumption, and each dollar costs 4 zlotys. So we want to know what will be the exchange rate between the peso and dollar. So let's remember what I just said about the tips that I told you. First tip is um, pick up to exchange or make sure that your exchange rates have the same currency at the bottom. So here I'm happy about this because I have dollars at the bottom and dollars at the bottom. So then that's good. That's the first tick. And the second tick, when I divide, make sure that I have pesos on top, because in the answer, I want to have pesos on top, right? So when I divide, I should divide Mexico first, and then at the bottom, Poland, right? Just to be sure that I am, following the logic from this. Okay, so now that will be the end of the exercise. But this will be the cross rate. That's how we call it. Do you remember? This is the cross rate, and this is the answer. Yeah. So just like that. If I ask you, can you calculate cross rate between Mexico and Poland, and this is the data that I give you, that's the answer. Okay. Let's complicate things a little bit. So now, instead of giving you the peso dollar exchange rate, let me give you the dollar peso exchange rate, a little bit different. And I'm still asking you to calculate the peso dollar. So now the first tip, make sure that you have the same currency at the bottom. Here we have a problem because we have dollars at the bottom, but pesos at the bottom. So we need to fix it. How can we fix this? Remember what you did in the first activity of this course. You can divide 1 over that number and it will allow you to turn upside down the exchange rate. As simple as that. That's why I insisted so much on this thing, which seemed very easy, but in practice it will become very important. So now you have dollars at the bottom and dollars at the bottom. So now you can divide. Just make sure that you divide in the correct way. So pesos on top and Polish zloty on the bottom, and then you have the answer again. So that will be the answer. That's another example, another exercise. Let me uh, change something again. What if I ask you, or I can keep it like that. What if I ask you to, sorry, and I was I was doing a really bad mistake. It should be peso and Polish zloty, or peso and dollar, because I already had that one. Sorry about that. Now, if I want to complicate things a little bit more, what if I ask you for the exchange rate between Polish zloty and peso? So this one, but upside down. You can do two things. There are two things you can do. If you haven't calculated this, what you can do is just divide in the correct order. So Poland first and then Mexico, because you have Poland on top and Mexico at the bottom. That's one thing you can do. Or another thing that you can do if you already did this calculation is just do 1 over this, because it's just switching the currencies, and then again, you have the answer. So be sure, that's why I insisted so much a few classes ago about this thing, about the 1 over that, and then indirect to direct, because it will help you to become more, I don't know how to call it, like skillful with these things. Like you can just handle the exchange rates really easy. So that's the topic, cross rates. You learn how to calculate the cross rate, and then in the next video I will explain, I will do an exercise with an actual strategy using the cross rate. Let me show you in the next video.